Karen Rowland began to fall asleep in the sun lounger. The paperback mystery in her lap closed before she could mark her place when she felt a shadow blocking the sun. Karen opened her eyes and saw an awkward figure, all 190 centimeters tall and 100 kilograms of weight. "You are in my sunshine, not to mention you woke me up." Karen raised her sunglasses to get a better look at him. Bill Rowland extended his right hand to offer his wife a frozen daiquiri. "Thought you could use another cold drink." "Bill Rowland, are you trying to get me drunk?" she said with a smile. Bill smiled back at her. "Not drunk, but maybe a little crazy. And then I will take you back to our room and empty your body." "And you think you need to give me alcohol first? When did I refuse you such an offer?" Karen and Bill enjoyed day 2 of a long 5-day weekend in the Palm Springs sun. Back home in Portland, the weather is just now starting to emerge from the gray cloud cover of winter and spring. The winter turned out to be rainy. Their neighbors said it was probably the harshest it had been in a decade. And the Rowlands needed that dose of desert sunshine. Bill handed Karen a drink before sitting next to her in the living room with his beer. Karen caught his eye. "What are you staring at?" "I never thought I'd ever see you in such a small bikini, that's all." "Don't blame me for looking like that." Karen couldn't help but laugh. "I can't believe you talked me into wearing this. I am 48 years old and the mother of 2 teenagers. Do you realize Hannah turns 20 next month? None of this changes the fact that you look great in that bikini." Bill was pleased not only because Karen was wearing this tiny suit, but also because she seemed less self-conscious about her legs. Of course, Karen made sure that they sat in the least crowded area of the pool, where few people pass by. Karen's right leg ended just above the knee, and her left leg still bore the scars from both shotgun blasts. Karen decided that now was the right time to tell Bill about her plans. "I was thinking about renting an office in the city and starting to take on more private detective work. Anthony is graduating from high school next year, and I don't want to be one of those slackers with no goals after he leaves for college. You have at least a dozen years or so before you retire, and I can't sit idly by until then." None of this surprised Bill. In fact, he expected this. He noticed a spark and additional interest in Karen's behavior after the last few cases she took on. The only surprise was that Karen had lasted this long since she sold her half of the New York detective agency to her partner. Both of their children benefited from the nearly 3 years Karen spent as a stay-at-home mom, and it was nice that she was treated harshly for the family's move to Portland. But it was time to let her do what she did best. Karen waited for Bill to answer, but after 20 years of marriage, she realized that he was letting her talk, so she continued. "Meetings at coffee shops lack professionalism, and I don't feel comfortable meeting in our home office. I found an office in the Pearl area. It is rented for 2 years at $750 per month. With the COVID shutdown, landlords are really having to find tenants. What do you think?" "Well, I like that your office will be next to mine, and the price is right. Are you planning to hire a receptionist?" "Not yet. It will take some time to establish itself. One nice thing is that thanks to online advertising, I can get my name out there right away. Do you remember the last time? I had to wait over 6 months for the new Yellow Pages phone book to come out." They spent the next 15 minutes discussing Karen's plans until their glasses were empty. Karen took a sip from her glass through a straw. "Let's go to the room." Bill didn't have to be asked twice. Bill collected their books and belongings while Karen walked towards their room on crutches. She left her prosthesis in her room because the resort had a saltwater pool. Bill hurried to catch up, enjoying the sight of his wife's bikini-clad ass. An hour later, Bill was lying on his back, staring at the ceiling, with a smile on his face. In the corner of his arm, with her head resting on his shoulder, Karen breathed quietly, almost falling asleep. Bill loved these moments even after 20 years of marriage. Karen's naked skin on his skin, her left leg on his leg, her hand on his chest. Both relax after making love. How lucky can one man be? 20 years ago, Karen literally fell into Bill's arms, tripping up the subway steps, 6 months pregnant with Hannah. Karen and Hank Price, Hannah's biological father, ended their brief romance before she found out she was pregnant. They met when both were assigned to an interagency counter-terrorism task force shortly after the Twin Towers collapsed and the country was in fear of what might happen next. Karen was an NYPD detective, and Hank worked for the feds. The romance ended when Hank was transferred to the Middle East. A month after he left, Karen's pregnancy was confirmed. So Hank Price was busy fighting terrorists in the Middle East, working for one of the American agencies. And Detective Karen Baker received an official assignment when she began appearing in the 5th month. Karen did not expect a marriage proposal from Hank. Their relationship wasn't based on that level of love. But she was glad when Hank agreed to help support the child. Then fate intervened. Karen was walking up the subway stairs on her way to work when she tripped and fell backwards right into the arms of Bill Rowland. Bill bought Karen a cup of coffee and the rest, as they say, is history. It only took a few dates for Bill to fall in love with Karen. With Hank's approval, Bill adopted 3-month-old Hannah when Bill and Karen married. Now, 19 years later, Hannah was finishing her freshman year at Oregon State University, and Anthony, their son, was finishing his high school course. In 15 months, Anthony will go to college. And for the first time in their marriage, Bill and Karen will find themselves in a home without children. The thought brought a smile to Bill's face, imagining him going downstairs to get his first cup of coffee without putting on his robe. Better yet, imagine Karen doing the same. Bill dozed off with this picture in his head. The resort's Italian restaurant was quite busy at 7:30 when Karen and Bill came down for dinner. Karen wore stylish trousers and a sleeveless blouse. She only wore skirts when she could wear opaque leggings to hide her prosthetic right leg and the scars on her left. It was too warm for leggings tonight. They sat at a table where 2 couples were finishing their meal. Bill almost asked the head waiter if they could move to another table because one of the women was clearly drunk. She was too loud and shrill. Looking back, he wished he had done it. But he refrained when he saw them eating dessert and assumed they would leave soon. Looking back, it's almost always 50-50. Bill and Karen were finishing giving their orders to the waiter when this happened. The drunk woman, who had her back to them, spoke loudly enough for several nearby tables to hear. "Have you seen a middle-aged MILF who wants to be by the pool? For God's sake, cover your damn legs." The woman sitting opposite the drunken screamer looked at the Rowlands table in horror. "Quiet, Joyce." She tried unsuccessfully to stop the drunkard. "What do you mean quiet?" she muttered indistinctly. "Don't shush me. It's not me who discuss everyone in the pool with this stump. Joyce, shut the fuck up now." The 2 men at the table followed the woman's gaze and saw Karen at the next table. Joyce started to say something, but one of the men interrupted her. "Joyce, stop it." He stood up and grabbed Joyce's hand, lifting her to her feet. "Jim, Maggie, could you please take Joyce out of the hall? I owe this couple an apology." As the other couple escorted a screaming Joyce out of the restaurant, the man remained behind. His face turned red with embarrassment. "I will not ask you to excuse my wife's behavior. There is no justification for such cruelty. I only ask that you accept my sincere apologies for her behavior." The man stood there, not knowing what else to say. He literally felt hurt when he saw the hurt look on Karen's face. Then he turned and left the restaurant. Karen put her hand in Bill's. "I don't think I can eat. Call our waiter and cancel our dinner, please." Bill saw that Karen was holding back tears. Out of all this bad luck, it was only yesterday that he finally convinced Karen to ignore the stares she received whenever someone saw her legs. Today was such a special day. Karen swam in the pool and sunbathed in this tiny bikini. Bill caught the waiter's attention and canceled the order. The waiter who witnessed the latest events said that he understood everything perfectly and also apologized. Bill and Karen returned to the room, and before the door closed, Karen sat on the edge of the bed and let out her emotions. For probably the 5th time in their 20 years of marriage, Bill saw Karen cry. He sat down next to her, putting his arm around her shoulders without saying a word. Karen broke the silence. "Did I ever tell you that I was voted best pair of legs in my high school yearbook? Damn it, Bill, I had great legs." Bill actually knew about this. Karen's mother shared this tidbit about the yearbook as the two of them sat in a hospital waiting room while Karen recovered from surgery to remove her right calf and foot. Karen's mother suffered a worse amputation than Karen herself, but she never shared it with anyone except Bill. Bill allowed Karen to cry and talk for a while. After about 15 minutes, he suggested that they take a walk outside to enjoy the warm evening desert air. Karen agreed, and the two went for a walk along one of the resort's golf cart paths. After walking a kilometer, they sat on a bench near the third target. That's when Karen became Karen again. I know I'm too sensitive. Bill almost laughed out loud when she said that. He was married to one of the coolest men or women he knew. It wasn't your legs that first attracted me to you, Karen looked Bill in the eyes. No, what was it? Your radiance, Karen laughed. It wasn't a glow, it was heatstroke and sweat. I was 6 months pregnant, and it was more than 30 degrees in the subway car. No wonder I almost fainted while walking up the stairs. Karen squeezed Bill's hand and spoke, I know how lucky I am. And I shouldn't let some drunk bitch ruin our vacation, and I won't. Take me back, let's go have a drink and something to eat. I couldn't eat a full meal, but I needed something. Karen stood up and grabbed Bill's hand to pull him off the bench. They had just sat down at the bar when the resort's assistant manager approached them. Here you are, Mrs. Rowland. I knocked on your door and just saw you come in here. Mr. Tinsdale asked me to give you this note. He also asked me to tell you that he paid for your entire 5-night stay here, including the bar and restaurant bill. Mr. and Mrs. Tinsdale have already left, so there is nothing to argue about. He handed Karen a note and left. Karen opened the note. My dear Mrs. Rowland and Mr. Rowland. Mr. Avery told me your name so I could contact you directly. Please accept my apologies once again for my wife's drunken behavior. I'm shocked but unfortunately not too surprised by what happened this evening. Mrs. Tinsdale is, to put it bluntly, a spoiled brat and has a habit of hurting people. My wife suggested we get back together this weekend. I'm afraid this has only reinforced to me all the reasons why we will soon cease to be husband and wife. I can no longer tolerate her behavior and neither can the couple we had dinner with this evening. I am giving you this personal information so that you both know that my wife is an aberration and does not reflect the views of most people. I'm writing this in hopes that you both can enjoy your remaining time here. Please accept my humble gift, your room and other fees for this purpose. With humble apologies, Simon Tinsdale. Karen finished reading and passed the note to Bill. I'll be damned. There were moments of anxiety over the next 3 days. But they did their best to get through those moments and enjoy the time before returning to Portland, tanned, rested, and relaxed. 4 months later, Karen had spent the last half hour cursing her terminal. Whoever said QuickBooks accounting software was easy to use was wrong. Cursing her terminal, she saved a few choice words for herself for being so damn computer illiterate. If it weren't for Anthony, she would have been completely lost. Karen decided to wait until the weekend and let Anthony do the bookkeeping. Outgoing invoices and invoices that needed to be paid will simply wait. On the other hand, at least there were bills to send out. Less than 3 months after her agency's major relaunch, things were going better than expected. Rowland's investigation earned enough to pay rent and expenses. And she had already contributed several thousand to her retirement fund. Not bad. Her old Portland police friend, Captain Glenn Hutchins, helped by directing clients in her direction. Several other officers, impressed by her work in solving Miller's murder, did the same. Just last month, Karen was able to find a 15-year-old runaway girl. A young girl was found living in the mountains east of Eugene with a 25-year-old drug addict. Her parents were happy to have their daughter back, although Karen knew from experience that the girl would have to spend months in a rehabilitation center. The girl had all the signs of Stockholm Syndrome. Hopefully, she would make a full recovery before the addict was released from prison in 10 or 12 years. Background checks on a half-dozen commercial clients still helped pay the bills. If the other business continued to grow, Karen would have to consider hiring a part-time employee to handle more routine work, not a bad problem in such a short time. Karen turned off her computer and was about to leave the office for lunch when the phone rang. Good morning, Rowland Investigation. Karen Rowland speaks. Good morning, Miss Rowland. My name is Larry Parker. I have a situation and I need your help. This relates to the issue of paternity. Are you ready to meet to discuss this? I'm free tomorrow at 9 in the morning. Will this suit you? We can meet here in my office. I will be there. Is the address on the website correct? On West Marshall Street? This is true. Dial 2 to 5 on the intercom and I'll open it for you. See you tomorrow at 9. Karen spent the rest of the day sorting through her mailbox, preparing for what tomorrow might bring. At 8:30 the next morning, Karen parked her car and walked the 2 blocks to her office building. As usual, Randall was sitting in the doorway. His sleeping bag was rolled up and his 2 backpacks were filled and ready to go. Good morning, Karen. Good morning, Randall. Randall stepped aside so Karen could open the door. Am I the first in the building today? Randall picked up his 2 bags after stuffing his sleeping bag into one. No, Mr. Nesbitt came in earlier. He said I could wait until then before moving on. I hope you don't mind. Was there any trouble last night? No, almost everyone knows that this is my place now. Randall is one of the many homeless people who make Portland their city. When Karen first started renting an office here, there were 2 or 3 men vying for the privilege of sleeping in the building's secure doorway. One of these men was especially vicious. Refused to move when any of the residents or their guests attempted to enter the building. He also had a disgusting habit of urinating indoors. Calling the police was a waste of time, so Karen made a deal with Randall, who seemed to be the most well-mannered, not to mention the largest, of the men. Karen paid Randall $150 a month to arrange the entrance himself, keep it clean, and vacated in the morning when clients began to appear. 2 other tenants in the building showed their appreciation to Karen by sharing the costs with her. Karen had just finished making a cup of coffee at Keurig when the intercom rang. 12 minutes early, she thought. She must be worried. Karen let Larry Parker in. Larry Parker sat across the table with a fresh cup of coffee in his hand. The best way to describe Mr. Parker is average. Height 180 centimeters, short-cropped brown hair, brown eyes, average build, neither handsome nor a simpleton. The kind of person you could pass by on the street dozens of times without noticing. Mr. Parker could be described as ordinary, but the reason he needed help was unique. Karen took notes while Parker spoke. 10 years ago, I met my wife, Julie. Parker paused. When I say my wife, I mean my ex-wife. She died 4 months ago. She had a congenital heart defect that was never discovered. It had never been treated, and she was only 29. Parker paused again. Karen reached for a box of tissues because he looked like he was about to cry. Parker pulled himself together and continued. When I met Julie, she was working as a waitress at the diner where I always had breakfast. She didn't have a ring on, so I asked her out. On our second date, she surprised me by telling me that she had a 1-year-old son. It's hard to believe because Julie looked too young to have a baby. It turns out she was only 19. I met a guy, Gunnar, the next day. He was the sweetest child, so happy. Almost everyone thought I was crazy for continuing to date Julie. I was only 22, and most guys my age weren't interested in instant family, especially raising a child that is not his. Larry Parker stopped to take a sip of coffee. He had no way of knowing what Karen was thinking at that moment. That Bill Rowland may have been just over 22 when they met, but Bill had no hesitation in adopting and raising Hannah, her child conceived by another man. Parker put down his coffee and continued his monologue. Julie didn't talk about her past, except to tell me that she grew up in Ohio and that her mother died when she was 13 and her father when she was 17. She said Gunnar's father ran away after learning she was pregnant. So call me naive, but the lack of details didn't give me pause. I was head over heels in love with Julie and Gunnar. A year later we got married and everything was wonderful. Julie received her GED and began working as a receptionist for a State Farm agent here in Portland. I graduated from the University of Portland and work as a systems analyst at Nike. I work remotely. I adopted Gunnar within the first year after we got married, and Gunnar and I get along great. I'm his dad. Everything was great until 4 months ago when Julie's heart gave out on her. I won't lie to you. It was hard, but Gunnar and I had each other to rely on. Then, 3 weeks ago, I received a subpoena for Gunnar's DNA testing. A man claiming to be Gunnar's biological father came out of nowhere and received a court order. The test results came last week. Gunnar is George Westfall's biological son and wants custody. I need you to find out who this guy is, where he's been, and why he wants Gunnar now. Karen finished writing and looked up. Any idea why this guy from Westfall showed up now? Parker shook his head in disgust. It's my own damn fault. I was going through Julie's personal belongings and came across a letter written before we met. Julie and a friend from Ohio hung out when Julie lived in Indiana a year before she moved to Portland. As far as I can tell from the letter, Julie never told her friend that she was pregnant. I doubt Julie even remembered she had the letter. Anyway, I found this Chrissy Walker in Toledo through Facebook. I told her that Julie had died and told her about Gunnar. Next thing I know, some woman in Dayton calls me and asks about Gunnar. I became suspicious and switched off. Then I got a subpoena for Gunnar's paternity test. What a damn mess. What do you want, Mr. Parker? I want to leave my son. I've raised him for the last 10 years since he was 1 year old. I don't know who this other clown is. All I know is what Julie told me. The guy ran away as soon as he heard Julie was pregnant. Who is this guy and why does he want Gunnar after 10 years? He could find Julie if he wanted. She didn't change her last name from Jenkins until she married me. Okay, I can do it, but I can't even guess how much it will cost. I might even have to go to Ohio, so it won't be cheap. Will this be a problem? Not really. Julie worked as an insurance agent and had life insurance. Most of it will go to Gunnar, but enough will go to me. I couldn't live on that money if it meant Gunnar wasn't my son. So do what you need to do. Just find something about this guy that will stop the court from granting him custody. I assume you have hired a lawyer? Yes. John Brown from Braun and Curtis. They told me your name. When is the hearing? John Brown asks for a delay. It was scheduled for 2 weeks, but he assures me that we can postpone it for a few more weeks. This is good. I should have enough time to answer your questions. Let's hope these are the right answers. Karen handed Parker a piece of paper. Now I have a few questions for you. First, Chrissy Walker's name and contact information. Karen waited until Parker pulled out her phone, scrolled through it, and started texting. What is the name of the woman who called you from Ohio? And do you have a phone number and address? Parker scrolled through his phone one more time before writing something on his notepad. Janice Clarkson lives in Dayton, Ohio, 937-555-2424. And finally, everything you have about Gunnar's biological father. Parker pulled a copy of the summons and other legal documents from his bag and handed them to Karen. That is all I have. Karen leafed through the papers. I quickly read 4 pages of documents. Okay, that should be enough to figure out who Mr. Westfall is. Karen pulled out the contract from her desk drawer. Read this, sign, and give me a check in advance. Once I have both, I'll start. Parker flipped through both pages of the contract before signing. John said that you are the best and what to expect from you. He also warned me to bring the check. Parker wrote a check for the deposit. Let's start. Thus began one of the strangest cases Karen had ever encountered. Over the next 2 days, Karen exhausted every resource she knew. All paths were dead ends. George Westfall did not exist. Karen called Larry Parker. Larry, have you ever met George Westfall? No. At the only meeting we had with his lawyer, Westfall was not there. The lawyer said he was traveling and had Westfall's power of attorney. Why are you asking? Karen didn't want to upset Parker. You just need a description of your appearance. George Westfall. I'll talk to you soon. Bye. Karen pressed end the call, wanting to end the conversation before Parker started asking questions. Karen's next call was to John Brown. After the greetings, she got straight to the point. John, could you tell me the name of the clinic where George Westfall's DNA sample was taken? Give me a second, Karen. 2 minutes later, Karen received the information. It was a clinic in Tempe, Arizona. A quick call to the clinic confirmed that it would need a court order for the clinic to release any information related to George Westfall, including physical descriptions. Karen called John again to get things started. While John was working on this, Karen contacted Chrissy Walker, introduced herself, and confirmed that she was working for Larry Parker, Julie's widowed husband. Chrissy was a source of information. When Mr. Parker told me about Julie and her son, I called my mom. She still lives next door to her stepmother, Julie. Julie's stepmother and Julie's father divorced a year after Julie disappeared, and she remarried a guy named Clarkson. That's why the names are different. I think this guy is disabled and never gets out of bed. Mom says Julie's dad isn't dead. He lives in Florida. Some retirees park trailers outside of Tampa. Mom doesn't think he's gotten married again, at least not since they stopped exchanging Christmas cards a few years ago. Julie had a half-brother who was a real bastard. None of the other girls were allowed to sleep at Julie's house while her stepbrother lived there. He was about 5 years older than Julie. He joined the army and was away most of the time after that, but he came home for Christmas and the holidays. Mom says she hasn't seen Jesse in over a year. Karen interrupted. Does your mother happen to have the address of Julie's father? I'm sure that's true. I'll call her after we hang up. Why did Julie disappear so many years ago? Well, it's always been a big mystery. We were in the middle of our senior year and Julie had just left. Neither her father nor stepmother knew why she left or where she went. I received a letter from her. She lived in Indiana, I think. I wrote her back and then never heard from her again. The last letter I sent to her at this address was returned. Not delivered. No forwarding address. Karen made a mental note to get a copy of Chrissy's letter from Larry Parker. Do you remember your stepbrother's last name? Clark. With an E at the end. I would be very grateful for Mr. Jenkins' address in Florida. Could you get it from your mother and call me back right now, please? Certainly. Thank you, Chrissy. Karen hung up. Only 15 minutes had passed when Chrissy called back with Jenkins' address in Mobile Park near Tampa and his phone number. Karen thanked Chrissy and immediately called Jenkins. Mr. Jenkins, my name is Karen Rowland. I am a private detective. I have some information regarding your daughter, Julie. I was wondering if we could meet and talk. About Julie? Where is she? Karen realized that Julie's father did not know that his daughter was dead. Perhaps he didn't even know she had a child. Mr. Jenkins, I will be happy to share any information I have about Julie. Can we meet on Saturday at your home? Could you tell me where she is? Not until we meet, sorry. But then I will try to answer your questions. Can we meet? Yes, I'll be here all day. Do we have to wait until Saturday? Sorry, yes. I'll let you know the time when I land in Tampa. Jenkins was still asking questions when Karen asked for time off and hung up. See you on Saturday, Mr. Jenkins. Goodbye. Karen booked a plane ticket to Tampa, then called Parker to ask for a copy of the letter. She took a connecting flight in Dallas on Friday evening and arrived in Tampa late that evening. She called Bill from the hotel to let him know she had arrived safely, and after exchanging I love yous with Bill, she tried to get some sleep. First thing on Saturday morning, Karen called Samuel Jenkins to make an appointment. Jenkins was so anxious to hear news about his daughter that he told Karen to come over immediately. Thanks to the GPS app in her rental car, Karen was able to find Jenkins' trailer within an hour. Before she had time to get out of the car, the screen door opened and a wiry old man with thin gray hair rushed towards the car. Mr. Jenkins, I'm Karen Rowland. Jenkins stopped in front of Karen, extending his hand in greeting. There was hope on the old man's face. "Let's go inside and sit down, Mr. Jenkins." Karen's words and the tone of her voice, spoken softly, deprived Jenkins of any expectation from the detective's visit. He knew this wouldn't be good news. His face seemed to have aged another 10 years as he turned, walked to the door, and held the screen open for Karen. "Would you like a cup of coffee, Miss Rowland?" Karen quickly looked around the small room. She was neat and clean. "Yes, please." Jenkins pointed to a chair, indicating where Karen should sit before walking into the next room. 30 seconds later, he returned with 2 cups. "Cream or sugar?" "No, only black." "Thank you." As they sat facing each other, Karen was afraid to say the next sentence. "Mr. Jenkins, I am sorry to inform you that your daughter Julie has passed away. She was suffering from a heart attack." Tears appeared in the old man's eyes. "This is what killed her mother." Here he fell silent for a moment. "Can you tell me something about her life over the past 10 years? Was she happy, you know?" "She lived in Portland, Oregon with her husband, Larry Parker. They seemed like a happy, loving couple. Julie had a son, now almost 11. Mr. Parker is raising a child. He adopted Julie's son, Gunnar, when the boy was 1 year old. That's why I'm here." At Mr. Parker's request. Julie didn't talk about her family. In fact, she told her husband that both of her parents were dead. "Can you tell me why she said that?" Samuel Jenkins began his statement of remorse. "It was my fault. Entirely my fault. When Julie's mother died, I was a lost soul, raising a 9-year-old girl alone. A couple of years later, I met, and within a year, married a single woman, Janice Clark. She had a 15-year-old son, a real wild boy. I tried to bring some fatherly discipline into the boy's life, but Janice didn't like it when I did anything to correct the boy's behavior. One of my problems was that I was so enamored with Janice that I turned into a beaten puppy. I let her run the household while I went to work to pay the bills. My relationship with Julie suffered when I was effectively controlled by this bitch. Janice's son, Jesse, got into some trouble his senior year of high school. He was allowed to finish school and enlisted in the army. By this time, Julie was 14. Jesse would come home for vacations and things like that. He seemed to be growing and maturing. He always fooled his mother. But now they both convinced me that Jesse had gotten his shit together. One day, Jesse came home for Christmas leave. By then, Julie was a senior in high school. Janice and I spent the evening at my office, Christmas party. When we returned home, we heard noises in Julie's room. When we opened the door to her room, Julie and Jesse were in bed. Jesse lying on top of Julie having sex. Jesse got off Julie and they both started screaming. Julie claimed she was raped. Jesse claimed Julie asked her to come into her room and seduced him. It was a he said, she said, back and forth. Janice then started yelling at Julie, calling her an easy girl, saying that all the rumors she heard about Julie had to be true, that she had sex with half the boys at school. I felt dizzy and made the biggest mistake of my life. I believed my wife's lies about my own daughter. Jenkins stopped there and looked across the room at a wall covered with framed photographs. There were photographs of a little girl and the same teenage girl. One was of a young woman, apparently Julie's mother, Jenkins' first wife. Another professional photo shows Jenkins and a woman, Julie between them, aged about 5. Jenkins took a photograph of young Julie off the wall and held it with both hands. This is the last time I saw my little daughter. A week later, she was gone. Karen finally interrupted Jenkins' monologue. When did you find out the truth? Not soon enough. Jesse returned to Camp Bragg in North Carolina. Less than 2 months later, I found out that Janice was a lying sack of crap. Janice tried to hide it from me, but I found out that Jesse had problems with the army. It turns out that one of the civilians at the base complained that Jesse raped her. It was another he said, she said. But how many times does it have to happen before you stop doubting who is telling the truth? The army didn't have enough money to prosecute Jesse, but they gave him a less than honorable discharge and kicked him out. I talked to Chrissy, our neighbor, and friend Julie. I asked her about rumors that Julie had sex with boys at school. Chrissy was beside herself. She swore that this couldn't be true, that Julie had a reputation as one of the good girls. Jenkins hung the photograph back on the wall and took his time straightening it out. Then he methodically straightened out the rest. Karen waited patiently for him to complete this simple task. Jenkins turned to Karen. I wrote to Julie in Indiana at the address Chrissy gave her. I never heard back from Julie, not a word. Suddenly, as if remembering something, Jenkins turned to Karen. You say Julie has a son? Do you have a photo of the boy? I'm sure I'd like to see a photo of a grandson I've never met. Yes, I have. Karen reached into her volume and opened the folder. She passed the photo of Gunnar that Parker had given her into Jenkins' outstretched hand, which was shaking. Oh my God, Jenkins raised his voice, staring at the photo. Son of a bitch. The old man's outburst of anger surprised Karen. What's wrong? This guy, Gunnar, he's a spitting image of Jesse. Karen shook her head. Can't be. A DNA test was carried out, which proved that the boy's father was a man named Westfall. I don't have a single photograph of Jesse, but I would swear that he was an exact copy of that boy. Suddenly, Karen understood why she had never been able to find information about George Westfall. Jenkins interrupted her train of thought. Do you think Larry Parker will let me meet the boy? I'll find out. In the meantime, I would appreciate it if you would keep this all between us. At least until I figure out why a man named Westfall has the DNA of a boy. Who am I going to tell? I don't talk to anyone from Ohio anymore. Well, Chrissy's mother knew where you lived and she had your phone number. Anyway, just promise not to spread the news about Gunnar and Jesse until I figure it all out. Jenkins agreed before Karen left the house and drove to the airport. A few hours later, she was on a flight to Ohio. They spent Saturday night at a hotel outside Dayton. Janice Clarkson will get a surprise visit on Sunday afternoon. Karen decided that shock and awe would be the best approach. On Sunday afternoon, Karen knocked on the door of a 1920s craftsman-style home that could use some paint and landscaping. The woman who answered the door had lines on her face that you suspected were evidence of years of hard times and frowns. Karen wanted to throw the old lady off balance. So as soon as the woman opened her mouth, Karen crossed the threshold, forcing the woman to return to the living room. Mrs. Clarkson, I'm here to ask you about your son, Jesse. Can you tell me when was the last time you saw your son? Clearly taken aback by the intrusion, Mrs. Clarkson stuttered. Who are you and what do you need from Jesse? I'm a private detective from Portland. I'm investigating DUAs to establish paternity involving a boy in Portland. What can you do? Should I say something about this? The old lady was unsettled and confused. This is exactly what Karen hoped to achieve. If this little available girl had a child with Jesse, then I deserve to know it and see my grandson. She had no right to hide my grandson from me. Karen tried to trip the old lady. So if you think this is Jesse's son, why is a man named George Westfall claiming paternity? Mrs. Clarkson looked like the proverbial deer in headlights and was unable to speak. At that moment, a man's voice came from the back of the house. Janice, who are you talking to? Come here. Mrs. Clarkson hurried out of the room. Karen could hear their voices rising with anger as they argued back and forth, but she couldn't make out the words. She looked around the room and saw family photographs on the mantelpiece. Karen quickly took a photo of them on her phone, noticing the similarity between an earlier photo of young Jesse and Parker's boy. She was again in the center of the room when Mrs. Clarkson returned. My husband says I don't have to answer your questions. You refuse to tell me where Jesse is or why George Westfall is claiming paternity. I can't. Now get out of my house. Karen walked to the door. She was still open but turned to the old lady before leaving. I think you'll regret not talking to me. You'll regret it. You don't know who you messed with. Now get out or I'll call the police. Karen took a commuter flight from Dayton to O'Hare. She had a 2-hour layover at O'Hare before flying to Portland. It would be nice to be home again. The previous evening, Karen had tried to find some information about Jesse Clark using the hotel's Wi-Fi. Almost nothing appeared, as if this person did not exist. On Monday, she will need to return to her office and make a few calls to some of her friends. A man like Jesse Clark at least leaves a few breadcrumbs behind. Just as Karen finished taking notes for herself and closed her notebook, a short man approached her. "Miss Karen Rowland." Karen looked up at the man. When she did, he showed his badge and ID. It was a U.S. Marshal's ID. The man handed Karen his business card. "I'm Fred Cummins from the U.S. Marshal's office. Can I have a seat?" Karen looked at the badge again, checking the authenticity of the badge and the name. She nodded towards the chair next to her in response to his question. "We understand that you have spoken with Mr. Jenkins and Mrs. Clarkson, among others, regarding Jesse Clark. May I ask why?" As a former police officer and experienced investigator, Karen knew how this game would end. She answered Cummins' question with a question. "I'm actually investigating the George Westfall case. Can you tell me why he is trying to establish paternity of a child that is most likely Jesse Clark's?" Cummins smiled. "Miss Rowland, I know that you are a better investigator than anyone. You, of course, already know that George Westfall and Jesse Clark are the same person." It was Karen's turn to smile. "Latin, Mr. Cummins. Boy, oh boy, you've done your homework. Now, why don't you tell me why Jesse Clark is in witness protection?" "I can't tell you everything, but I will tell you that Clark helped a certain district attorney in South Florida take down a drug cartel. This DA is considering running for governor or senator." "I don't know." "The arrest made him a big star, and he does everything in his power to protect Clark. So you're going to help a guy who raped his teenage sister, raped another woman at Fort Bragg, and, if I can read between the lines, was involved with foreign drug traffickers. Take his biological son, whom he never met, from a man who loves and raised him." Cummins looked confused. "Clark doesn't want a child. It's his mother. She wants her grandson. Once Westfall gets custody, he will give him up to his mother to raise. And let her spoil a good child? Raise him the way she raised Jesse? You must be joking. Have you met this woman?" "I can't say that I met. Look, being assigned to WICSEC sometimes gives me goosebumps and sometimes makes me feel like I'm doing something good. There are people I protect who have done something really good by putting themselves in harm's way to take out the bad guys." Cummins paused. "Sometimes there are idiots like Clark who made a deal to avoid prosecution. So, what do you want from me? Do you really expect my client to sit idly by while his son is taken from him? And I believe this boy is Larry Parker's son?" Cummins lowered his voice and answered Karen's question in a conspiratorial tone. "No, you're right. I have done my homework and know enough about you to know that what I say next will remain between us. I just conveyed the message I was told to convey. Now I'm going to tell you that as far as I'm concerned, Jesse Clark, George Westfall, can rot in hell. There are several influential people in Bogota who are looking for Clark not only because he snitched on them, but also because he stole a significant amount of money in the process." As soon as he finished the last sentence, Karen's flight was announced. Cummins stood up. "Goodbye, Miss Rowland. Thank you for listening." He left without saying another word before Karen could answer. It was just after 9 when Karen's plane landed at Portland International Airport. Karen was exhausted and thanked God that 3 days ago she had allowed Bill to talk her into taking her to the airport and would now be waiting at the curb to pick her up. She was passing the security gate when she noticed Bill with a bouquet of flowers in his hand. Maybe it was because she was so tired, but her eyes became a little misty and a wide smile appeared on her face. Bill hugged his wife and pulled her close. "Welcome home, baby." Karen kissed Bill on the lips as he released her to grab her bag and hand her the flowers. "It's only been 3 days, Bill. What came over you?" "I don't know. It just felt like it was a long 3 days. I knew you had a rough weekend and I wanted you to feel missed. You don't know half of it. Wait until I tell you what happened at O'Hare." Karen had already told Bill about her theory that George Westfall was Jesse Clark and that the half-brother raped his half-sister. Now she knew that this was just the tip of the iceberg. On the way home, Karen told Bill about what she had learned in Dayton and Chicago. Bill listened, then asked the $64,000 question. "So, what are you going to do with this information?" "I don't know yet. The last thing I want is to end up in the middle of some shit between the Colombians and some DA and his snitch. Someone will get hurt. I don't want it to be Parker, his son, or me." When they arrived at the house, Karen exhaled. She hadn't realized how much she'd been holding her breath until that moment. Walking through the door, Anthony greeted her with a tight hug. Mom and son spent 15 minutes discussing Anthony's weekend, including the latest news about the girl his son was dating. After Karen showered and changed into comfortable loungewear, she went downstairs to where Bill was sitting in the office with a glass of wine, waiting for Karen. They talked about everything except business. Bill knew that Karen needed to get some rest. Otherwise, she would never be able to sleep. For 10 minutes, Bill had Karen laughing uncontrollably as he recounted the latest antics of the young couple in the neighborhood. It was like living next door to a TV sitcom. Tom Taylor spent Saturday morning in his garage, spray painting outdoor furniture, before Amy Taylor noticed paint had run all over the side of their Mercedes. "Amy's new SL?" "Yes." "What did she do?" "I was in front of the house digging up that bush you wanted to uproot when I heard her scream. I arrived just in time to see Amy take the can and spray Tom's shirt. I was just about to intervene when Tom ripped off his shirt, grabbed Amy, and carried her into the house, shouting that he would repaint her car." Karen laughed even louder. "Damn, these two are the horniest couple in the world. Everything turns them on." "Yes, but they have only been married for a year. Wait until they have kids." "That didn't stop you from being a horny dog, Mr. Rowland." "That's because I'm married to you." Karen stood up, hopped on her good leg towards Bill and plopped down on his lap. They were just kissing when Anthony came in to say goodnight. "Again, you two? Do me a favor? Could you keep your voice down, please?" Bill replied, "No promises." He picked up his wife and carried her up the stairs. It was a good night, 1,000 miles south of Portland. As Bill met Karen at the airport terminal, Jesse Clark was hanging up after the last half hour of listening to his mother cry, berating him for all the wasted years she had never known her grandson. When she wasn't crying, she was screaming at him to do whatever it took to get the boy into her care. "Ma, I'm trying, but you know I have to be careful. The guys are still looking for Jesse Clark, and I'm already breaking the rules of my agreement with the feds by trying to get custody like Westfall. If people make the connection, I'm dead." "Well, this detective must have made some kind of connection, Jesse. Otherwise, why did she appear here?" "We don't know that yet, Ma." But as soon as the words left his lips, Jesse knew what this lady from Roland must suspect, if not know. It's time to make contact with Roland. Jesse immediately found Karen Roland on the internet. Unfortunately, the same internet that made it easy for Karen to advertise her new agency made it just as easy for Jesse Clark to find out where her agency was located. And the first thing Clark did was book a plane ticket to Portland on Monday morning. Karen got up the next morning and headed to her office. Larry Parker was supposed to meet her at lunchtime to get a status report. Although the information could have been conveyed over the phone, Karen felt that a face-to-face meeting was the best option, especially given the volume of information and how the bills were piling up. Karen saw Randall across the street as she opened the front door. He stood in front of a grocery store, hat in hand, quietly asking for handouts from people passing by. Randall saw Karen and waved in greeting. Neither of them paid much attention to the large man standing 2 houses down the street. It didn't take long for another tenant to come along. Jesse forced his way into the building, explaining that he had an appointment with a detective on the 2nd floor. Jesse walked up the stairs to the 2nd floor and was pleased to see that the door to Roland investigation was open. He walked in and saw Karen sitting at her desk, looking through some files. Intimidation was Jesse Clark's specialty. He stood in front of her desk and stuck out his chest, making him look impressive. I want you to stop pestering my mother, stop prying into my business, and tell Larry Parker that you are no longer involved in his business. Jesse pointed his finger at Karen, uttering his threats. It's easy for a big guy like Clark, a guy who's used to pushing women around, to underestimate a woman like Karen. At 180 centimeters tall and weighing 60 kilograms, she was not physically intimidating. The fact that she was well trained in martial arts and was a skilled marksman was not obvious when looking at the pretty woman. It happened so quickly, Clark didn't even have time to blink an eye. Karen pulled that finger back toward his hand without breaking it, while simultaneously pulling the gun out from under the table and pointing it at his face. Get the hell out of my office. Clark couldn't believe his eyes. His mind went blank. This skinny bitch is bossing me around, he thought to himself. No woman orders Jesse Clark around. Who the hell does she think she's dealing with? He backed out of the office while Karen kept the gun pointed at him. Clark spoke out loud. You'll be sorry, Roland, he added to himself. You can't imagine how sorry you will be, bitch. Jesse Clark vowed that he would never underestimate this woman again. He wouldn't take any chances the next time they met. And he swore that there would definitely be a next time. Karen took a minute to get her breathing back to normal, stood up and locked the door. She took a business card from her wallet and made a call. Fred Cummins answered the phone. Cummins, this is Karen Roland. Your boyfriend just came into my office and threatened me. All bets are off. You might want to let him know about this. Perhaps he will be smart enough to understand the message. She hung up before Marshall could answer. If he had said something, it would have been, I doubt it. Jesse Clark was a pain in the ass. And deep down, Cummins hoped that George Westphal would just disappear. Karen made her decision and her next call was to Hank Price. She spent 20 minutes going over everything she had learned up to this point, including that Clark might be a threat. I know you have connections in the DEA. Do you think you can contact some Colombians I could meet? Usually, Hank tried to calm Karen down, but this was different. No one is threatening his daughter's mother or his best friend's wife. I'll call you back. In the meantime, be careful. Hank hung up. Hank made contacts and came to an agreement. That evening, Karen told Bill that she was going to New York and why. It was late, 1 in the morning in New York, when Bill dialed Hank's number. Hank picked up the phone after the first ring. Yes? Hank, this is Bill. Karen just told me what you two have planned. Will she be safe? I will do everything in my power to ensure that. I can't lose her, Hank. Does she really need to be there? You know her. You married her. Hank grinned. She thinks she should be there, if only to cover for me. I understand. I wouldn't let her do this to anyone else, you know. I know. And that's why I won't let anything happen. Thank you, Hank. Good night. Good night, Bill. They both hung up. 4 days later, Karen was in New York. She and Hank had a meeting with a certain Carlos Castillo. Over the last 4 days, Hank was able to confirm that Jesse Clark was in hiding, not only because he had turned state's evidence against his former employers, but also had stolen at least $4 million from them. The Colombians were eager to get back as much of this money as possible and would likely offer a reward to anyone who would help them get it back. The meeting took place in a hangar at the executive airport. A sleek private jet contrasted with 7 folding chairs arranged in a circle. When one of the Colombians tried to search them for weapons, Hank refused. What? Do you think we're stupid enough to start a shootout here? I see there are 5 of you here. You all keep your weapons, and we will keep ours. The Colombian turned and saw one of the men in the circle nod in agreement. Hank and Karen joined the men in the circle. As much as it bothered her feminist sensibilities, Karen was a realist. Having dealt with this macho culture in the past, she let Hank lead the conversation. They were introduced to each other and Hank initiated negotiations. If we could give you the name he currently uses and a good idea where you might find him, what is the finder's fee? Karen was surprised when a man who introduced himself as Arias answered instead of Castillo. What are you offering? Hank answered. 10% is pretty standard. Almost everyone in the circle was stunned when Arias objected. Or I could just torture you two until one of you talks, saving my boss 10%. I might even get a bonus. Hank reacted coolly. It would be short-sighted on your part. Karen and I have friends. She has the NYPD. I have drones. My friends in Langley know that we are here and that I am talking to you. Some of these friends would love any excuse to pose as Bruce Willis to your boss in Bogota by flying a drone down his chimney. Arias realized that he had gone too far, nervously looking back at Carlos, who was still silent. Arias tried to come to his senses. I thought we were negotiating. You asked for 10%. I didn't answer. Carlos broke the silence by saying something to Arias in Spanish before turning to Hank and Karen. Please excuse my young comrade. He has seen too many of your Hollywood gangster movies, and because of his youth, he believes that if he talks tough, he will earn the respect of others. Hank smiled at Carlos, knowing that he was the man who made the decisions. We were all young once. Carlos smiled back. Yes, I thought that today I would give him the opportunity to study, a chance to grow. He'll be fine. He has a good teacher. Arias listened to the conversation between the two men, realizing that this is how people with power show respect and lust for power. He also realized that during this conversation, neither man disrespected him in front of others. Arias learned something that day. Carlos asked Hank, do you think that 5% will be enough? There will be significant costs ahead of us before we get anything back. Hank looked at Karen, who nodded in agreement. 5% is normal. How will it be paid? The money will be transferred to an account in the Cayman Islands. Whatever we return, 5% will be paid within a month. Hank didn't need to ask why they could trust the Colombians. He already knew from reliable sources that Carlos Castillo was a man of his word, regardless of how he made his money. When Karen and Hank left, they talked. This is, of course, drug money. Hank expected this from her. If you feel bad, donate it to a worthy charity. Nobody says you have to keep it. How did you become so damn cynical? Oh, come on, Karen. It might have something to do with the fact that you worked for the government for so long. Do you know how many politicians became millionaires while serving in Congress? Do you think all this money came from legitimate sources, always in the altruistic interests of the citizens they supposedly serve? At least I don't pretend to be working in the interests of the common man. You are cynical? What about Clark? Any doubts? I'm not going to lose sleep over him. One less rapist in the world. Hank glanced at Karen as he drove. And who is cynical now? They crossed the bridge back into Manhattan. Hank broke the silence. When the deposit arrives, give me a third. Do what you want with the rest. I was going to split it with you, 50-50. I know it was, but you earned it. You know you can't bring money to the States, right? What do you suggest? Spend it in the Caribbean. You and Bill could take a couple of vacations of a lifetime. Get out of this damp Portland winter and take a swim in the warm blue sea. Sounds great, but I think I should wait and see what happens before I spend any money. A week passed without any news. Karen did her best to calm Larry Parker down. Without promising anything, she tried to reassure him that everything was fine so he wouldn't lose Gunner. But the paternity and custody hearing was 2 weeks away. Parker was starting to get nervous. And if he was willing to admit it, then so was Karen. Bill dropped Karen off in front of her office. The first thing that caught her attention was that Randall wasn't at the door, which meant he had either spent the night in one of his girlfriend's tents, which he was prone to do on occasion, or one of the other lodgers had arrived early in the morning. The post-pandemic concept of remote work has kept companies from renting offices here. There were only 5 offices occupied in the entire building, and there were rumors that the top 2 or 3 floors, which were now empty, would soon be converted into apartments instead of offices. When she entered her office, she had no time to react to the shock of electricity. Her mind flashed blindingly white and then went dark. Sometime later, Karen woke up to find herself tied to a chair and gagged so that she could mutter but not scream. When her vision cleared, she saw Jesse Clark standing in front of her with a large hunting knife in his hand. "Are you waking up, Karen? Good girl. It's time to have some fun." "Well, I'm going to have fun, but you're not going to have much fun." Clark saw Karen staring at the knife. She noticed blood on the handle. It was Randall's homeless blood. Clark moved the knife from his face down to his chest. Karen followed the movement of the knife blade and only then noticed that she was only wearing a bra and panties. "Have you already realized where you are?" He paused. "We are on the 5th floor of your own building. There are 2 empty floors between us and any of the occupied offices. You will be able to scream, although not loud enough for anyone to hear, with this bandage in your mouth. I thought about using a gag, but then I would miss the pleasure of your moans." "Or are they screams?" The sinister smile never left Clark's face as he approached Karen again with the knife. "Time is over. Let's get down to business. We have a few hours until your hubby comes back to pick you up." "See, I did my homework too." Clark began to unfasten his belt with his left hand. Karen heard and saw a dart in Clark's neck. "What the hell?" was all that came out of his mouth as Clark reached for his neck with his free hand before falling to the ground. 3 masked men came into Karen's line of sight, picked Clark up and began to drag him away. Carlos then walked over to the chair, holding Karen's blouse. "Let me take this off." Carlos cut the plastic straps with a Bowie knife, untied the ties in her mouth and handed Karen a blouse. "I'm sorry we couldn't come earlier. I'm just glad you came now." Karen pulled on her blouse and was delighted when Carlos handed her the prosthesis and trousers from the floor without looking at her nakedness. Fausto was watching the building and called as soon as Clark showed up this morning. "Our people were watching his house in Tempe, your office, and your house back home. We didn't know where he would show up, so our plane sat on the runway in Sacramento, waiting for the call. As soon as Fausto called, we took off immediately." "Are you okay?" "Confused, but okay. I can't believe I let him have this effect on me." "Where are you taking him?" "From the country. It's better for you not to know anything else. We need to find out where our money is and ask him to return it to us. That's why Fausto wasn't allowed to intervene when he saw you being kidnapped. He had strict instructions not to interfere until we arrived." "I'm sorry. If it had gone any further, I'm sure Fausto wouldn't have tolerated it. He was between a rock and a hard place." Karen understood what it must be like to work for someone with Carlos's reputation. "Tell Fausto I said thank you. I have to leave now to catch my plane. I want to ask you for a big favor. Can you wait 3 hours before calling the police on the man Jesse killed? That's how long it will take us to leave U.S. airspace." "Do you know about Randall?" "Yes, Fausto didn't have time to intervene before Clark killed him with a knife. Once again, I apologize. Do you think you'll have any trouble with the U.S. Marshals?" "I can wait before calling, but I'll probably ask my husband to take the day off and sit with me." "I won't have any problems with the Marshals. The DA in Florida will make a fuss, but he can shove it up his ass." Carlos couldn't help but smile. This gringa had grace and poise. She reminded him of the woman he had once spent a year fighting alongside when he had spent that year in Nicaragua. He was an idealistic 20-year-old who had fought against the Contras. He loved this woman, although she had never treated him as anything other than her little brother. "Goodbye, Karen." He kissed her forehead. "You will find out whether the funds will be credited to the accounts, but I doubt that we will ever see each other again." He turned away. Karen thought to herself, cops and criminals. How many times in her life when she was on the right side of the law did she feel respect for someone who was on the other side of that line? And at the same time, she would not hesitate to send this man to jail if she had such an opportunity. Karen walked down the stairs to her office. She picked up the phone and called. "Bill, can you take the afternoon off? I need you." Karen waited with Bill until 4 hours had passed, then made an anonymous call to the police about the dead man. No one has reported the body or responded to a private message about Randall Harvey's death. Karen paid for Randall's cremation and scattered his ashes at Mount Hood a month later. More than once, Randall spoke of the reason he chose Portland. So I could see this mountain on a clear day. Karen waited until the next morning to tell Larry Parker that he probably shouldn't worry about George Westfall. My sources tell me that he decided to return underground and leave the country forever. That's how she put it. When George failed to show up for the hearing, Larry was granted permanent custody. Janice Clarkson called several times, but was told she would never see the boy. Her attempt to steal the boy from Larry was the nail in that coffin. Samuel Jenkins was allowed to meet his grandson. He took the train and spent a whole week in Portland. One day he called Karen and asked for a meeting. "Thank you for softening up Larry for me. I know you did it, he told me so. Mr. Jenkins, you can't spend your whole life reproaching yourself for something that happened more than 10 years ago." "Yes, I can. Julie was a good girl and she depended on me to keep her safe after her mother died. And I failed her. I prayed that heaven would exist and Julie would be there with her mother. She deserves heaven. My problem is that if there is a heaven, then is there a hell? Because that's where I belong when I die. Then I find myself praying that God does not exist because I know that a just God will punish me for my sin by not protecting my daughter." Karen took a minute to collect her thoughts before answering. Almost every religion allows repentance and salvation. If I were you, I would talk to a priest, minister, or rabbi. You need to forgive yourself if you are truly sorry. I didn't know Julie, but from what Larry told me, she would want it. She didn't have enough time, that's all. Jenkins looked up from his coffee cup. "You remind me of Julie's mother. She had this way of saying kind things even when she was wishful thinking. That's why I was so lost after she died." "Thank you." Jenkins patted Karen on the hand, stood up, and left the cafe. Just under 3 months later, Karen received an email that simply stated, "Your account has been replenished." Karen ran the antivirus and keylogging programs that Anthony had previously installed on her computer, and when the programs exited with an all-clear message, she logged into the Cayman account. Here it is, $156,000. Karen transferred a third of the funds to Hank's account in Dubai. A third to an international charity in Toronto that helped return children sold into sexual slavery, and kept a third for her own purposes. A year later, Karen treated the Rowland family and selected guests to a luxurious all-expenses-paid week at a private beach villa on Little Cayman. One dark night, well after midnight, Bill and Karen left the villa and went down to the beach in only their dressing gowns. On this cloudless, moonless night, there were billions of stars shining in the sky and, with the exception of one small 15-watt light bulb near the front door of the villa, there was no artificial lighting to spoil the view. "I can't believe you talked me into this," Karen whispered, taking off her prosthesis and robe. "Come on," Bill whispered back. "When else will we have a chance to go skinny dipping?" Karen didn't answer as Bill picked her up and carried her into the water. She began to float on her back, looking at the stars. Bill could see exposed parts of the body that were not hidden by the water. Her damp skin glistened. He knew better than to try to fulfill his other fantasy of making love in the water, so he settled for watching Karen roll over to swim, her buttocks now above the surface of the water. The two of them continued to swim in the shallow water, enjoying the feeling of freedom. Less than 30 meters from where their bathrobes lay on the sand, Anthony and Lisa, his girlfriend, were lying on a towel. Although the night was almost as dark as ink, they saw two figures walk towards the water and throw off their robes. Anthony and Lisa lay quietly until they realized that his parents were naked. "Oh God," he whispered. "I think it's pretty cute," Lisa said as Bill carried Karen to the water. "What if it were your parents?" "Okay, I understand. Gross, but still cute. I still can't believe your parents were kind enough to invite me on this trip. They really like you." Lisa's eyes became misty, and she brought up the topic that they had worked so hard to avoid. "Do you think we have a chance to ever become as happy? I mean, with each other?" "I hope so. I love you." Anthony kissed Lisa with all the passion that an 18-year-old boy feels for another 18-year-old girl. They both had to start college in a month, and the odds were stacked against them. But some kids beat the odds. When Anthony and Lisa broke their kiss and looked up at the sky, everything in the universe seemed possible. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.